and Eileen.
First of all, I'd just like to say I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I just want to thank these wonderful, generous musicians for coming and putting all of this effort into sharing their love for Luke with all of us through music. It's a wonderful tribute. I'll introduce ourselves. I am Kathy, and this is Eileen. And we have been lifelong friends of Morris and Terry and Luke and Jack. And we've been given the greatest of privileges to recount some stories of Luke's childhood and teenage years for you. I'm starting with some of Luke's childhood stories, as my daughter Charlotte and Luke grew up side by side from the beginning, and Jack and Luke were the brothers that she never had. In fact, Luke helped to bring Charlotte home from the hospital when she was born. Luke and Charlotte spent time with an elderly couple, Matt and Dora, in Vernon when they were just little, and Luke used to run around and entertain Charlotte and keep her giggling and laughing. And this relationship lasted right up until the very end. After a brief stay in Vernon, our hometown, Morris, Terry, and Luke moved to Victoria. And this is where Luke began his journey as an imaginary, creative, and adventurous soul. When he was little, a sign of a truly creative child, he had imaginary friends, Sink, Sink, and Tonk, Tonk. And he played baseball with them in the front yard. He played kitchen and restaurant in his playroom, and he had a full collection of stuffed toys because he loved to play Noah's Ark with Lauren Faulkner. His favorites were Bunny and Lammy. When Jack was born, Luke finally had this playmate that he was looking for. He was so excited. When Jack came home from the hospital, however, Luke was convinced that there was something wrong with Jack. Because Jack couldn't focus his eyes, he would look at him and say, "Jack has a staring problem." He kept asking when Jack would be big enough to play with, and he didn't wait long. Even before Jack could walk, he would throw him in a laundry basket, careen him around down the hallway and into the dining room, and deliberately tip the basket with Jack squealing in delight. But when Jack could walk, he started to get back at Luke, because when Luke was in the bathtub, Jack would take his clothes and throw them in the toilet. Jack and Luke would deliver lines from movies at the breakfast table. Their favorites were So I Married an Axe Murderer, The Princess Bride, Inconceivable, and Shrek, and in the morning, I'll make waffles. Jack, Luke, and Charlotte went to daycare together at Belle Sika's house, where they played with the family and gorged on homemade macaroni and cheese. Belle, Sabrina, and their family were very special to Luke. They spoiled him wonderfully. And as they got older, Jack and Luke went off to Spanish daycare in the neighborhood at the Pumpans house. They played in the yard, did crafts that had epic Star Wars and Warhammer battles with the Pumpan children. There were street hockey games with Jack and the litter of neighborhood kids in goal. Luke loved World War II stories. He loved history, and that stayed with him all the way through. Jack remembers using magnifying glasses to wound the plastic soldiers and painting blood on them. Another time, Terry saw a line of neighborhood kids with their hands behind their heads, and Luke holding a water gun on them, herding them to the shed. Worried, she asked, "What game is this?" And Luke replied, "It's just UN peacekeepers, Mum." He had a way of telling a story that always made it more interesting, even if the facts weren't exactly spot on. The Rachwalskis had a dress-up bin, and Luke would run around the house in the neighborhood dressed up as a spaceman and Spider-Man. And as he got older, he was always up for Halloween and dress-up. And who can forget his take on Jimi Hendrix? We saw a picture of that in the slideshow. Family Christmases were about who could eat more of Mom's stuffing, playing board games, and watching movies. Luke loved going for dim sum at Don Me's restaurant with the family, which was a tradition that they've had for years and years. Jack recalls one time when he and Luke were dropped off for a swim at Commonwealth Pool. In those days before cell phones, they spent all their money on snacks, so then they had to walk all the way home in flip-flops because they didn't have any more money for a phone call. Family years were filled with many close friends from school, soccer, baseball. There were many family outings, a lot of time at the beaches in Gordon Head. And at this point, I would like to thank, on behalf of the family, all of the wonderful neighbors, friends, everyone from the community who's come out today. Thank you so much. And now Eileen will take over for the teenage years.
Thank you. I'm really honored to speak about my friend Luke today. I'll tell you about school. School was pretty easy for Luke. In high school, he struggled a bit with some algebra, so Terry and Morris decided to hire a tutor, and Luke had figured out exactly what it would take to pass, and then he would just basically take the rest of the year off. He was a smart cookie. Everyone thought that Luke maybe wanted to be a designer or something because he took textile classes 3 times. But if you asked Luke why he was in textiles again, he would say, because that's where the girls are. Luke used his skills to retrofit a skimboard to wear like a backpack so that he could go on his bike and hit the beach. Real creative kid. When Jack went to Lambrick Park High School for his grade 9 orientation, Luke was there to suddenly grab Jack from behind and put him in a big wrestling chokehold, because that's what big brothers do. Luke graduated in 2009, and Luke convinced Terry and Morris to host a grad party by telling them that, there'd be 30 people or so. So 150 people later, it was a really good party. Good friends, no problems. Luke even had his Brazilian brother Tulio there, who was living with them from Brazil at that time, so it was a really special celebration. Luke loved that he could ask for things that his brother wouldn't necessarily ask for. I mean, how many sons want to raid their mother's jewelry boxes looking for cool bracelets, ethnic beads, and funky rings? He said, "Yeah, Mom, you can take me to Copacabana Beach, and, you can take Jack to, he wants to see the ice floes and play hockey in Siberia." So when Luke was 14, Terry, Luke, and I boarded a plane for Brazil. Terry had lived there with her adopted Portuguese family, and I had relatives to visit as well. The journey was pretty close to being the Amazing Race, with Terry negotiating bus tickets in her loud and expressive fluent Portuguese, while Luke and I scrambled to hoist our suitcases of the new leather shoes and dulce de leche onto the already moving bus. Brazil, for those of you that haven't been there, is sort of like living in a musical. The streets are filled with music, the cars are constantly booming with music, the family events all involve music, and there's salsa and drums, and everywhere you go there's music. Even if you're going to have their meal of feijoada, there's a song that goes along with it before you sit down to eat. So Luke loved that. He loved the Brazilian hippie fairs and the beaches, the dune buggies, the girls, the music, the girls. And he also managed to eat more barbecued beef than anyone had ever seen at a churrascaria. We managed to explore the Pantanal grasslands on horseback and the rainforest pathways by foot, and in the canopies by ziplining alongside the parrots and the monkeys, while below us the lagoons were dotted with caiman alligators. We explored caves, snorkeled down the Anaconda River with the piranha. There were giant river otters in the area and giant dorado fish. We even snorkeled through rapids. It was a great time, and I'll never forget it. And we took a slow metal boat through the sort of tight, overgrown jungle area. And we passed capybara and hundreds of unusual birds and reptiles. It was great. We quietly drifted past a floating object at one point, and without skipping a beat, Luke exclaimed, "You know, you don't get to see this every day, but I smell dead gator." We laughed so hard it scared a flock of birds when we rocked the boat. And, well, when Luke was 15, I had the chance to take a road trip with Terry and Luke, and the goal was to see the 4th of July fireworks and the Seattle Music Museum. Luke was pretty excited to wander around this 140,000 square feet of memorabilia and interactive instruments and mock recording studios settings, so I was slightly bored by all the technical displays, and once I'd seen the actual beaded bikini and headdress that Cher wore, I was pretty well ready to go. But then I began to watch Luke, and he was genuinely in his element. He tried every noise-making instrument and drifted off into his own little head-shaking world. The ear-to-ear smile finally came through when we reached the Holy Grail, the Jimi Hendrix guitar. And so began the Purple Haze. When Luke got Osgood Schlatters disease in his knees, he could no longer play soccer. That's when he got serious about music and about playing the guitar. His mom and dad drove him to weekly music lessons, mostly at Ken Kanoki's place. Luke serenaded us at home with guitar solos of his, when we had these various theme nights at Terry and Morris's place. One of my favorites was arriving, and Luke was in his best dressed suit and nice jacket and tie, and greeted me with saying, "Bond, James Bond." And of course his watch could, do all kinds of super things. He was a creative kid. Luke loved to be different, and he developed his own style. In grade 8, he wore a tie to school every day, on the outside of his t-shirt, no less. He loved vintage shirts, cowboy wear, psychedelics, and paisleys. He amassed an eclectic wardrobe that fit well with his beard, that they say came easy for him to grow. The beard came in handy for getting into bars and clubs, including going into a funky little live music bar in Greenwich Village in New York City with his dad when he was only 19. I was lucky enough to be there to see Luke take his first steps into the arms of his proud parents. Luke was an easy baby, a happy-go-lucky kid, and when Luke hit the teen years, he tried to make up for all that as he was stretching his wings. He would tell Terry and Morris, "Well, it's a teenager's job to give their parents grief." Simple. Terry and Morris had a different perspective on all of this, but love conquers all. And all of the memories are now the simple treasures to keep and to hold close. I know someone out there I'd seen on the Facebook page had actually tattooed a picture of Luke's face on themselves. And I wanted to pay tribute to him, but I can't go that far. But I know that I wish peaceful days for this giant Luke family, the Lichnowskis, the Rachwalskis, and all of the Luke friends and family, and the smiles that we'll remember him by. Thank you.
So we heard a little bit about how Luke was the life of the party. I got to see him at his best and worst at those parties.